Ouch. Okay. Thank you all for attending this quick little overview of Readex. Um, Now, Readex is a digital primary source provider, but who and what is Readex? The history of Readex, we started as the Readex Microprint Corporation back in 1939. The founder of Readex was a gentleman by the name of Albert Bonai, who was very involved in the New York City publishing scene in the 1920s, 30s, but he was also an inventor, and he was the inventor or a strong early supporter of microprint, which was the precursor to microfiche and microfilm. So it was very cutting edge technology for its time. Happily, that time was very short lived because microprint, if you see it today, it is a very early technology of for the micro formats, but it's without it, we would not be where we are today. Um, so for many decades, Readex partnered with the American Antiquarian Society, also known as the AAS, in Worcester, Massachusetts, and they are the preeminent uh, research library for Americana, specifically, early American content. Originally, we partnered with them and created collections of their content on microformat, microprint, and microfiche. We started in the early 2000s to digitize their content, and the first collection of theirs that we digitized was Early American Imprints Series 1. It's also known as the Evans Collection. And it's known as Evans because the bibliographer at the AAS that compiled that information, Charles Evans was his name. And so a lot of faculty and librarians will also refer to this collection by the nickname, if you will, of Evans Collection. Today, all of the Readex collections that we have digitized, whether in partnership with the AAS or with other publishing partners, total over tens of millions of digital pages of primary source content. Now, there is a quick video on the Readex website that kind of explains what Readex is, who Readex is, what we've done, our history, and it's called Pathways to the Past. I've included a link to the video here in the presentation that I think, if you've not seen it yet, could also be a really good resource for background information. So it's probably about 3.5, 4 minutes. So I say watch it later at your leisure.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Sure. Now, I've mentioned primary sources numerous times. Now, what are primary sources? They are the immediate firsthand accounts of a topic, of an event, from people that were there on site, that experienced it, that had a direct connection to it, that saw the event happen, that lived through a flood or an earthquake. They listened to a speech given by Gaddafi. So it's an evidence of history, the original records of objects created by participants or observers at the time that the event occurred. And the primary sources are used by students, by faculty, by librarians to interpret and analyze the past and see how past events have maybe created current events, or they have led to where we are today. And it's a really fascinating resource to see how history is cyclical, that this is not the first time we've been through a pandemic. We've all seen articles about the 1918 pandemic and how it compares to today, and what we learned during that time period are being applied now. So it's primary sources are very good at showing everyday life and the different how we survived, if you will. So primary sources may include, but are not limited to, letters, manuscripts, diaries, journals, newspapers, very important, photographs, pamphlets, maps. All of these are primary sources. And for the most part, a lot of our collections do include um, most, but if not all, of these primary source varieties. So this is just, why should people use primary sources? Why should faculty? Why should students care? And as I said, they're a window into the past. So to study where we are today and how it relates to the past, you need primary sources. Now for Readex, there are two larger collection families, and then we can kind of break them down from there. The Archive of Americana is the overall overreaching name for all of our collections that have a American-centric content. So within the Archive of Americana, there are three larger groups: America's Historical Imprints, America's Historical Newspapers, and then America's Historical Government Documents. The second large overarching collection, or families of collection, is the Archive of International Studies. And that's where basically all of our international content falls under. So the Foreign Broadcast Information Service daily reports, the Joint Publication Research Service reports, the Origins of Modern Science Technology family of collections, and the 20th Century Global Perspectives collections. Now, this is a screenshot from the Readex website, which hopefully will help you visualize and see the amount of content that we have under each larger family. So we've got the Archive of Americana on the left side, the Archive of International Studies on the right side. And then again, you'll see the America's Historical Newspapers, America's Historical Imprints, and America's Historical Government Documents right down here as the three larger groups. And then within those groups, we have got smaller subsets. So the America's Historical Newspapers is the largest of all the families. It consists of early American newspaper series. There are 16 different series right now of early American newspapers, and the time period for early American newspapers is 1690 to 1922. African American newspapers we have two series of, and Hispanic American newspapers we've got one series. All told, these newspaper series are, the 90 million pages of content incorporates some other newspaper collections, but there are easily 15, 20 million pages of content for newspapers. So it is AHN, as we refer to it, is one of our larger families of products again, and also I say the bestseller, at least for American universities, because newspapers are the easiest for students, especially undergrad students, to understand what they're searching.
Well, that's an impressive collection, especially for studying like American studies. It's quite a consolidated offer and unique, would you say?
Absolutely. None of our competitors are digitizing as many newspapers from all over the U.S. For that time period as we are. And we're digitizing newspapers that are very rare, that in the 19th century, I think that the numbers that I've heard, that they're around between 55 and 60,000 newspapers from that time period. Some of the newspapers were created to work on a particular presidential campaign, or they were around for a couple of months and then they went under. The editor, the creator of the newspaper moved to a new state or to a new city, and so the newspaper folded. But these are very rare newspapers that still have value for research. Um, some of the big city newspapers, New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Chicago, that's great. But if you just get the big city newspapers, America starting out was a very rural country. So you need the newspapers from the smaller towns to really understand and see what was happening in uh, the rest of society, the small, again, the small towns, the farmers, the agriculture, the business, the mercantile. You need all that information, and it is again from all over the U.S. so that you get differing political viewpoints as well. So you can see the events of the Spanish flu in 1918, see how that was impacting life in Philadelphia versus how it was impacting life in St. Louis and the suburbs. So it's one of the benefits of newspapers as well is that they are so versatile, that they cover so many different topics that it is very easy for librarians to understand the value of the content and why they should make the investment of historical newspapers. Uh, Moving on, this is taken from our again from our website. I clicked on the family of collections, and so under America's historical newspapers, you will see that early American newspapers available by series. Here in the U.S., you can also acquire the content by era, by decade. I'm not sure if that option is available internationally, or if you just try to sell it by series.
It is, yeah, yeah.
Okay. The I want to stress that the era and decade options, those are pre-selected titles pulled from series 1 through 7. So it is a much smaller representation than a full series. So if you have an institution that doesn't need a full, like all of our full series, they just need some quality newspapers from different eras, different decades that reflect differing viewpoints, then the era decade option could be a good way for them to go. But I say most of the institutions in the U.S. that acquire early American newspapers prefer to buy a full series at a time if they can. So, and then we have some other newspaper options as well. American Business, American Gazettes, American Politics, American Religion. These are all created from the early American newspapers series. So these are just some topical newspaper packages. Again, another option for an institution to acquire their content. American Historical Imprints, again, that's the family name, the umbrella name for all of our historical collections that are based on books, broadsides, pamphlets, ephemera, so non-newspaper content. We have over 150,000 publications. The coverage spans 1535 to 1922, depending on the coverage. It is 6 million plus pages and growing. Again, this is the full onslaught of the collection. So depending on the collection, like the early American imprints collections, Evans, that's over 2 million pages of content. The Shaw Shoemaker collection, which is early American imprint series 2, that's also just over 2 million pages of content. Other databases have 4.5 million pages of content. Some have 500,000 pages. So the size of the collection can vary depending on the topic and where we sourced it from. So these collections contain nearly, every book, pamphlet, and broadside published in colonial America up to 1922. They can be searched together or separately. We have got, the American Historical Imprints is a platform, but you can also search a specific collection like the Evans collection or the American Broadsides and Ephemera collection, or the American Pamphlets collection, or African history and culture. It can be searched in conjunction with Caribbean history and culture or on their own. So again, this is taken from the Readex website, and this is the family of America's historical imprints. America's historical government publications, the largest and most, I say, well-known is the U.S. Congressional Serial Set. This is the U.S. Congressional Serial Set is the backbone for American history. And it took us over 10 years to digitize and create indexing for every single publication in this collection. So there's over 370,000 documents that we've digitized from the originals. It's a gorgeous database image-wise, and just for the quality of the maps and the illustrations. Many, if not most, are in high resolution color. The indexing that we've done for this collection truly does open it up. If you're looking for, explorations from the American West, detailing interactions with Native Americans. If you're looking for Commodore Perry's explorations of China, of the South China Seas and Japan, it's in there, along with some gorgeous Japanese color blocks. So it is an American government document, but the amount of international content that's in this collection, whether it's treaties between the U.S. and foreign countries, again, as I said, explorations and the impressions, the first impressions that people have had of exploring different parts of the world, it's in here, and it's just amazing. So I definitely recommend taking some time to play around in the serial set. It's very easy to use, and it's just it's a wonderful, wonderful primary source collection.
Thanks, Erin. I just have a comment. Something I've heard from various parts of the world is another way to view this U.S. Congressional Serial Set is, in layman's terms, it's essentially what the UK have as the parliamentary papers or the governmental papers. So this is what essentially this is. It's just the American version of the parliamentary papers.
Yes, I mean that's definitely. If an institution, international institution, has the British parliamentary papers, then clearly they have some interest in government history, whether it's UK history or even world history. This would be a fantastic complement to that. So it is ideally every document that was presented before Congress, whether it was in the House or the Senate. There's going to be some high level, if you will, content in this. The hearings for the Titanic sinking are going to be in the U.S. Congressional Serial Set, and the interviews that were conducted for the hearings for the Titanic happened right on the dock as the survivors are coming off the Carpathia. There were senators there that were swearing in the survivors, getting their testimony. That's in the serial set. But you also have some heart-wrenching personal letters, personal documents from normal American citizens in the 19th century that were requesting a divorce. And to do that, they had to submit documentation to the U.S. Senate to get it granted. And so you get some social and cultural history of why they are requesting a divorce, and just it's really, really fascinating. So for a variety of content, again, 370,000 documents. This is 12 million pages of primary source content. This is really, really fascinating.
Wow.
It really, really is. And it's very easy to to find the international content or to find documents about Tripoli or Libya, piracy and explorations. I mean, the indexing that we've done. Again, we did human level indexing. So we had a team of editors and indexers reading every single document, trying to determine like the appropriate terms to be applied. So it is a labor of love, most definitely.
I'm sure. I was in the production unit in Chester, Vermont, where all of the scanning and the digitizing happens, and it's a really impressive operation to, as you say, this congressional serial set taking 10 years to digitize is truly amazing, and to have that at one's fingertips is quite the research tool to have. It's really, really rich. So a fantastic resource indeed.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We're going to jump over to the Archive of International Studies. This can also fall under America's Historical Government Documents, depending on how you want to look at it. But for all of our international content, it's under the Archive of International Studies. I say that the two main collections under the AIS, and that those which I'd say make it the most of your most sales for the international market that I've seen are FBIS, the Foreign Broadcast Information Service Daily Reports, and JPRS, the Joint Publication Research Service Daily Reports. The two of these are, I say, sibling collections. Clearly, FBIS started first in 1941, and then JPRS started in 1955, 1957. FBIS, I mean, together, they are the principal U.S. archive of open source intelligence. And what we mean by open source intelligence, that's information that was gathered from openly available sources like news broadcasts, speeches, interviews, scholarly journals. The purpose of gathering this information was not for propaganda, but it was to serve intelligence goals. So the content was captured and translated from the native language into English and sent back to the U.S., to policymakers, to analysts in the U.S. government to figure out what was going on in the rest of the world. So if you have faculty or grad students that are looking for international content from mid to late 20th century, but they can't read a foreign language, or the content that they're looking for is from a country, again, where they might have passable Spanish, but they don't know Farsi. They don't need to worry about this. I mean, again, it's all international content that's been translated. And no, we do not have the original for FBIS. A lot of this were radio broadcasts that were captured, whether it was underground radio broadcasts from behind the Iron Curtain, or just normal radio broadcasts that the government would send out. We don't have the originals to compare the translations to what was being broadcast. I have received that question a few times in the past. So this is the initial page for FBIS. Now this is the full FBIS collection, but as you know, it is possible to acquire this content several different ways. The first way is in two different chunks: the 1941 to 1974 portion, and then April 1st, 1974 to 1996. That's the second chunk that can be acquired. The 1974 to 1996 portion can also be acquired by region. The original paper copies, paper collection for FBIS from the 1974 to 1996 period, those were broken down into series from around the world. And so we still digitized the 74 to 96 portion by series to follow along with that. The 1941 to 1974 portion was just one daily report that covered the entire world. And so it's not broken down by series, and so it cannot be acquired by series. So if an institution is looking at the 1941 to 1974 portion, it can only be acquired in one chunk. Make sense?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Okay. Something to remember and to consider with FBIS that, for example, the Middle East North Africa series, I think might be FBIS Series 1 for 1974 to 1996. That is content from that area, from those particular countries, but it may not be all of the content about what was happening in that time in that region. So there could be speeches and broadcasts that were captured in Europe or in different parts of Africa that referenced what was going on in the Middle East. And so there's the fine line, if you will, that yes, you want content from a particular region, but if you want all the content about a particular region, you're still going to need to acquire the full database. Make sense?
Yes, makes sense.
Okay.
Yep.
We can discuss that later or dive more in depth if you would like it at a future point. Now the interface for JPRS is very, very similar to FBIS. Again, we've broken it out. If you know the countries country or region that you are expecting your content from. JPRS, it's only possible to acquire as a full collection. It's not broken down by region or article type as being a different package. So it can only be acquired as the full JPRS collection. JPRS started as a scientific content, if you will. So if you're looking for history of science, if you're looking for early medical research, environmental issues, socioeconomic, JPRS would be a collection to go to. I say the majority of the content from JPRS is from communist countries or the communist countries at the time. So there's a lot of content from the Soviet Union, from China, Vietnam, behind the Iron Curtain in JPRS. I think there's probably, jumping back to FBIS, this probably has content, I say, maybe better representation from all over the world than JPRS, but that's just my impression. But I say both of these, again, it's all international content. So these would be the collections if an institution does not have a strong department in American history or literature. For international studies, military science, international relations, global affairs, human rights, political viewpoints from around the world. These would be the databases that I think that the universities would be interested in. Jumping to the good segue for who are our typical customers. Here in the U.S., I see that the PhD granting programs, those schools that are members of ARL, the Association of Research Libraries, those would definitely be our core market. So that could be Hong Kong University for an international customer, Cambridge, Oxford, in the UK. Would also be natural customers for our databases. The British Library, um, the major universities down in Australia, whether it's Sydney, Melbourne, Monash, so on. And then the next level would be the master level program. So those that are maybe um, no, breeding ground is the wrong, not the right phrase, but the the step up from a BA, the next level is to get a master's. And for those schools, those students that want to get a PhD, an advanced degree in history, English, political science, they would want to go to a school that is a good segue to a PhD granting institution that has very strong reputation. And so, uh, those universities would also be core schools for us to go after. And then third is a strong liberal arts college. So those schools that are smaller could just have, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 students, but all they offer are degrees in humanities, English, poli sci, history, communication, religious studies, those that understand the importance of um, uh, studying humans, studying humanities. Um, those schools are also, again, for the American market, uh, key key schools for us to go after. I don't know if the international market has schools that just offer BA degrees.
They do, yeah,
Okay.
very much so, yeah.
Okay. So they might be something to consider. Again, you have to weigh um, the best bang for your buck on where to invest your time and energy. But for us, um, tackling these types of schools definitely flushes out the portfolio. So um, it definitely helps. So within the typical customer, who are the faculty and who are the departments that we try to go after and contact to make sure they're aware of the Readex offerings? I've mentioned history departments, history faculty several times over the past half an hour. Specifically within history departments, keywords that I look for when I do, go to the history department webpage and take a look at faculty, and it might be some legwork, it might be some time consuming, but if the history department, if you can see that they have strengths in American studies, Africana studies, African American studies, Latin American Caribbean studies, Asian studies, women's studies, history of science, Middle Eastern studies. Um, those are all key areas that our collections would fit in. The Africana studies and Caribbean studies can be tied together, especially if there are faculty that are focusing on the Atlantic world. Um, they could be tracing um, the slave trade and the start from Africa, across to South America and up to the Caribbean. So they could have interest in content pertaining to the history of Africa, but then also the history of Latin America, South America, and the Caribbean. Um, the English departments, um, English faculty are a very strong user of our newspaper collections. For American Lit, for cultural studies, creative writing, a lot of the books, or what we now think of the core books from the 19th century started out in newspapers. And so to read the original Mark Twain's, you need to read them in a newspaper. So very, very important. Theater studies, looking at theater reviews, book reviews, travel writing. These are all keywords that I would look for when diving into the English departments at English or literature departments could be another word, another key term that's used at a university. Political science could also be known as like global studies, international affairs, international relations. I look for, American politics, military studies, human rights, comparative politics. Um, some departments I've seen have like environmental politics. That could also be of interest. Again, depending on, the classes that they teach and their own personal research. So these are all, keywords that I would either look for, on a faculty website, or, when I'm talking with a librarian, asking them what are the strengths of the departments, what, are they hiring new faculty, what areas are they hiring in, what new classes. That's also a big one. Like, are there new classes that will be offered next year or in the future? And could those new classes need, online databases to be used, whether in the class, by the students, or by the faculty members? So those are just some questions that I think about when I am talking with a librarian, but also trying to determine how familiar that librarian is, with the history department. Are there key members, key faculty that he or she talk with all the time that request the databases? Is there a liaison in the history department that works closely with the library to request, that again represents the department, the library, and what their interests are? That person could also be a key resource for us to talk to figure out, do we have content that would meet the needs of their department? So what I'm going to do now, if I may, is I'm going to jump out to, let me see, I went to Ben Gurion University, and this is how I do some homework, before I get to a university. I go to academics, and then I would jump down to the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences. That's typically where the departments that we are most interested in are found. I would go to departments of study and programs. General history seems to be where our content would be most appropriate. And wait for, you can see by this image that they're, Che Guevara, Gandhi, Abraham Lincoln, Napoleon. I think that's Princess Diana. So I think we're in the right direction here. And then usually they would have an entry for faculty, but for this particular institution, they refer to everyone as staff members. Now, unfortunately, with this web page, you have to dive into every single faculty member to figure out, are they appropriate for our content? Like, what do they teach? What do they research? I'm going to click on Dr. Uran. Now, the two areas I would click on here are definitely research interests. So Renaissance humanism and history and theory of the human sciences, early modern Europe, and then what he's teaching, Middle Ages, Renaissance Enlightenment, secularization, fundamentalism. Not really areas for us. So he would not be someone that I would want to reach out to, because it wouldn't make sense. Let me dive down. I'm going to click on this professor because he's chair for graduate and research students. So any faculty member that also has a specific title or chair, or if they are a named professor, they might have more seniority or importance in the department, and so they could have more sway. So this is late Middle Ages, persecutions and blood libels, Mediterranean studies. So again, his time period is very early for us, but it could also go back to research interests. You might want to like dive into Mediterranean studies to see what that actually means. Like, what is the time period? Does he teach classes? Because they don't list any here. That we could have content from FBIS that meets his needs. Jump to the second page. Kai Ben-Air. Okay, late modern Europe, 18th, 20th centuries, memory studies, history of terrorism. So keywords like this, like the history of terrorism, definitely jumped out at me. The Spanish, influenza pandemic. We would have content pertaining to the pandemic in our early American newspapers. The history of terrorism, I think that FBIS definitely could be of interest for him if he's looking at the foundations of, again, what was going on in the Middle East in the 1970s, 1980s. Could that be traced to interactions in the 1940s? So I think that could be, again, some faculty to look at this institution. So that's how I would try to prep for an on-site meeting with librarians. If you have faculty names that you can go in and say, I think Dr. So-and-so could be interested in this collection because of X, Y, and Z, then that can get the librarian's mind thinking of, oh yeah, they are teaching X class and Y class, and that could be of interest. Something else to consider when prepping for a meeting on campus. If I can go to the library page and see what other databases the library has and what databases they have on trial. If they have collections of other primary source content from Adam Matthew, ProQuest, Gale, EBSCO, which are our main competitors here in the States, if they have databases of primary source content from them, then it seems to be that they already recognize the value of primary source content. So they don't need to be sold on the value of primary source databases, but they just need to know how our content can be applied and used by their faculty and students. Now, the databases on trial, this also can show what they're interested in, what they're looking at, and connecting to the internet right now. They've got several of our databases on trial, which is fantastic. So Middle East, North Africa, the Foreign Broadcast Information Service, they've got Part 1, and the U.S. Congressional Serial Set. And so Access Middle East from the Newsbank side of the company. So all of these indicate to me that they're looking clearly for more Middle Eastern content for their faculty and students, which is great. We definitely have that for them to pursue. Any additional questions? I feel I've done a lot of talking.
Yeah, I think this is really helpful to see, how you find the target prospect to talk to, and then know maybe their research interest to know like what kind of topic or collections to recommend down
Yeah,
the line.
yeah. And never be afraid to say to a librarian, I don't know, I'm not sure if this fits, but based on, what I've seen in the classes that he or she teaches, I think that this collection could be of interest. And I mean, librarians like to teach. And so if they can, um, or if you can help them talk themselves through why they might need the database and how the database could be used, it might be more powerful than you saying you need this because X, Y, and Z. But if they can come to that realization themselves, it could be an easier sell for them.
That's a good point. Um, maybe because I'm not familiar with these collections, but how do you know, like, if they have a particular interest in, topic or direction, do you do research beforehand to make sure our collection cover that topic?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I say playing around in our databases is very, very important. And it can be to depending on what university I'm going to and my relationship with them. Sometimes I'm just having a conversation with librarians, over coffee, over tea. They're already familiar with our platform, with our content, so they don't need to be sold on that aspect of things. That they already use the databases, so they just need to know what's new from us, and just to see, from their end, what's new, what faculty, what classes, what grad students could use our content. But other times there will be new librarians at a university that really aren't familiar with Readex, or they just think of us as early American imprints and they don't know about FBIS or early American newspapers. So then I would pull up, go into a collection specifically and play around and show them the variety of content. There are times that I'll have the Readex website pulled up and I'll just hover over the collections tab so that the librarians can see all the content that we have. And they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know you all had this. And then they start to get excited. I'm like, oh yes, we definitely want to take a look at this collection and this collection. Can we do that now? Do you have time? So, let them again get excited about our content, and they can steer the conversation to a point, but you always want to make sure um, you have questions, and you want to guide them to a conclusion.
Yeah, yeah. Aaron, one other thing I noticed as well on this website is if you can navigate to the find collections by A to Z.
Yeah.
What I found really helpful here is if you can go by subject. So
Yes.
if you're in a particular department at a campus one day,
Yep.
this is a good tool to help you position certain collections for that specific area of study. I thought that
Absolutely.
was really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's again, 19th century is one of our strengths, but in the 20th century we're getting there as well. So um, it yeah, this is very, very key. Something else that you all may want to, if you've not done so yet, is explore our videos. As you know, we have breakfast presentations twice a year at a major conference here in the US, and we have recorded those talks, and we have put them on the website. So if there are particular faculty that are interested in, political history, American, slavery history, theater history, and why they should use those primary sources in their in with their students, these are great videos to send along to historians, and also for you all to get a better sense of how our databases are used by professors in their classes and with their research. So I definitely recommend, listening to turning one on in the background during lunch and just listening. They're very, very fascinating.
Fantastic. Erin, another, as well as like FBIS and JPRS,
Yes.
one of the other kind of major selling collections that we have in international is the Evans collection. And a common question that I see coming in regarding that is how that fits in to the broader English, the short title catalogue.
Okay.
And because I think a lot of universities would acquire the whole catalogue, but I know that Evans is one element of that larger
Yes.
short title catalogue. So could you just maybe give us a brief description about what that is and how Readex fits into that catalogue, if you will?
I will try.
That's a big question, I know.
It's a very big question. Yes. Early American Imprints, Series 1, Evans, 1639 to 1800. It is virtually every non-serial. So again, every non-newspaper book, pamphlet, broadside published in America, colonial America, during the 17th, 18th centuries. If an institution has EBO or ECHO, so early English books online and 18th century collections online. They're from, I think, ProQuest and Gale, respectively. If an institution has those two databases and don't have Evans, they need to acquire Evans. It's that simple. They may think that they already have all of the content, in ECHO or in EBO, but they don't. EBO is just English books online, whereas Evans, it's American content. There are some imprints in Evans that were published or printed outside of the U.S., whether it was in London, maybe even some parts of Canada, Ireland. I can dive into Evans later and show you. But it's all American content that in the short title catalog, I would say with EVO and ECHO represents all of the imprints published during a particular time period. So if the history of the book is an area of interest, whether in the English department, or the history department, if they don't have Evans, then they can't do a full history of the book with. So, if that makes sense. Yeah, the Evans collection from early Bibles, early sermons, whether it's from the Mathers, some captivity narratives, and so there are some imprints by women that supposedly were captured by Native Americans, lived with them for a little while, and then came back to white society, for lack of a better phrase, and they're descriptions of what happened when they were living with Native Americans, either as captives and or that maybe transitioned into a different relationship with the Native Americans. It's very, very fascinating. There's some children's books, some early government documents. So it is it's a fascinating representation of the founding of America and our society at the time. So it's really, really, it's a fantastic collection.
Super.
But again, that's something else to look at on the library website if the institution, again, has EBO or ECHO, and they don't have Evans. They need to buy Evans.
Yeah, I'm seeing Evans is one of probably our biggest selling collection.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
When Readex moved to the digital format, I joined Readex in 2003, and when I came along, we had the Evans collection, and we had just announced we were digitizing the serial set, and then we digitized early American newspapers and Shaw Shoemaker. So I've seen Readex grow from one database to dozens of databases. But back in 2000, 2001, the former president of Readex polled librarians and asked them what were the key collections for American history that needed to be digitized. And Evans was the number one collection. So that's why we digitized it first. Again, it is one of the core databases for early American history.
Erin, is it unique to Newsbank?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We've had the Evans collection has been part of the Readex portfolio from the beginning. So originally we worked with the AAS and we put this content, the Evans collection, on microprint, the original microprint cards. And then we transitioned into microfiche. And so then we put Evans on microfiche. And then we digitized it. And so there are some institutions that have bought the Evans collection from us 3 different times over the past, 80 plus years. So hopefully they will. I don't know what other format could come after digital, but yes, it's unique to Readex. So no other publisher has the Evans collection.
That's wonderful. And also, if they only buy a portion, and maybe next year another portion, comparing to they buy the whole collection, is there a difference? Like, is there a price difference? Is there a setup difference?
So for some of our larger, more comprehensive collections, like Evans or the Early American Imprints, like the full Early American Imprints series, but also the FBIS and the JPRS collections, some institutions don't need the full comprehensive content or can't afford the full content. So we have started, let me jump back to the collections. So under the American Historical Imprints, the American Children's Books, American Sermons, and Native American Indians, these are 3 subsets created from the full Early American Imprints collection. So again, if an institution, their library budget does not allow for the library to acquire the full Early American Imprints collection, but they know that they're interested in Native American content or American sermons for religious studies, then they can just acquire that content. And then down the line, we can work with them to get them pricing to flesh out the rest of Early American Imprints. And so this would be, the price points would be smaller than if they were to look at the full Early American Imprints. I'm going to jump quick over to the 20th Century Global Perspectives collections. These are smaller subsets of the larger FBIS collection for the most part. So what I've started to notice here in the United States, I don't know if it's the same in the international market, but some institutions do not have specific government document librarians anymore. And so the librarians, there's no champion for the FBIS database. The name, it's a government document collection name, so it's not that exciting. It kind of hides the value of the content. And without someone championing the database, that they know what's in the collection, it may not get used as much. So several years ago, we started to create some smaller, more subject-specific content, again, from FBIS, that made it easier for librarians and faculty to understand what they were searching and how it could be applied, in their classes. So if you've got a history faculty member that is studying and researching or teaching the Korean and Vietnam War, or the American proxy wars, this would be an easy database for a library to acquire. Apartheid, global perspectives. So for a faculty member studying South African history, this again would be an easy collection for the library to be like, okay, I know the faculty member can use this database in their teaching. The price points for these databases would also be smaller than the full FBIS collection. So again, it allows the university to start small, to start acquiring content in smaller chunks, and then if they know they want the rest of the FBIS content, we can figure out the price for them, at a later date. Does that help?
Yeah, helps a lot. Thank you.
Sure.
So if even they bought in portion, but if at the end they bought the whole collection, it will be the same, just as they bought as a whole at once, right?
Or, if I understand your question correctly, I mean, some institutions, they might have started out acquiring, FBIS. They have the 41 to 74 portion, but they want the 74 to 96 portion is too expensive for them, but they want the American proxy wars. We can figure out a price for this collection based on what they've already acquired out of FBIS. So that's the magic of our pricing team. And the same for, if they have the first three collections, apartheid, American proxy wars, American race relations, they acquire all three, but then they want to see what the price is to acquire the rest of the FBIS collection, we can come up with a price for them.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. And then what we've also done, here in domestic sales, for those customers that have FBIS that have already acquired the full collection, some that we show them the 20th century global perspectives collections, and we indicate and we let them know, like, this is content that's pulled from FBIS. Like, you've already acquired access to the content, so we can turn on access to the databases that are created from FBIS for them. And some libraries like that because they know that FBIS is not getting used to the best of its ability. But if they can, again, show a faculty member the American Proxy War collection or Cold War, immigrations, migrations, refugees, these are all more interesting titles that could grab the attention of a faculty member and a student. And so if they can have more specific access points to the content, they definitely want these turned on. And so on our end, we just have customer service turn on access to the collections, provided, again, that the university has already acquired access to the full FBIS collection.
Oh, fantastic. I wasn't aware of that, where a researcher can really just narrow their focus, and it helps them to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that makes a big difference to kind of lay out what they can search inside instead of just one collection.
Yeah, absolutely. I